What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back. I know it's been a while, but it's time for us to lock in. So welcome back to another reaction video. Today we are back with the GOAT, Mr. Ballen, checking out some of his videos and hopefully, get a good little video here. This is a video that I seen a few weeks ago. Excuse me for my voice, still working on getting my voice back. But I saw this video a few weeks ago and I've been wanting to check it out since I saw it. And so we're gonna check it out today, and hopefully it's a banger. So let's see what happens. There are a couple other videos of his I also want to check out. Also look good. So we're gonna start the day with this one. But with that being said, thank y'all for all the love and support. God bless all of y'all. Thank y'all for showing mad love on these videos when you guys do see them. I'm greatly appreciative of that. Today's video is called "A Nosy Neighbor Recorded His Murderer." So again, as usual, I will leave the link in the description to this original video so that if you guys just want to hear it without me yapping, you can go ahead and do that. But other than that, like I said, I love y'all and nothing else to say, but let's get to it.
On December 30th, 2016, a woman sat down at her computer in her New Mexico home and pulled up the video feed from her surveillance system. Everybody in her neighborhood was terrified. There was a killer on the loose, and the police did not seem to have any idea who it could be or what their motivation was. So, on her computer, she scrolled back 2 days and began going through the footage frame by frame, looking for anything suspicious. And for a while, really nothing stood out on this recording. The only thing that really happened was her neighbor came home from a trip at some point, and then some time passed, and then the neighbor left again. That was basically it. And so the woman was starting to think that what she was doing was kind of pointless. Until, all of a sudden, in the corner of the screen, a dark figure appeared. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of Strange, Dark, and Mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do. And we upload 2, 3, even 4 times a week.
Oh, we changed
So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the
upscaling
like button
production. I like
bedroom
that.
and secretly hide alarm clocks all over the room that are all set to go off at various different points throughout the night.
Yeah, that's
Also,
not
please
nice.
subscribe.
That's not nice. But you can tell it's been a while since I've watched his videos because now he's gotten back to doing it multiple times because I'm used to saying we upload once a week. So it's been a while, so it's time for me to lock in.
To our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our uploads.
Last time posting as well, if there are any videos that you want to see specifically from Mr. Ballen or any other creator, any other like police dash cam, anything that you guys want to see me record, please drop it in the comments below. I would love to react to some of the videos that you guys suggest. So if there's anything that you want to see, please let me know and I will do my best to make a reaction video to it. So just let me know and I'll check it out. But let's get back to it.
Okay, let's get into today's story.
Watch it again. What if I don't want to? What if once is enough? All right, I'm sorry.
On the evening of December 28th, 2016,
Sound effects, boy.
a 54-year-old man named Don Fluitt drove down the highway into the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico.
But did he do it?
Beside him was his 11-year-old daughter, Sienna, who had fallen asleep in the passenger seat. They'd been driving for nearly 12 hours, all the way from Don's mother's home in California, where they'd just spent Christmas. But the holiday had not really been a happy one, because a few weeks earlier, Don's sister, Janice, had died of breast cancer. And Janice was really one of the only true close family members Don had left. His dad and his other sister were both already dead, and his younger brother Dennis wasn't talking to him after a big argument the year before. So, as soon as Don had gotten the news that Janice had unfortunately passed away, he'd immediately negotiated with his ex-wife to take their daughter, Sienna, and go see his mom. He wished they could have stayed longer, but he had to get back to work. Don had a job at an agency that served the developmentally disabled, and there was a big meeting coming up that he just couldn't miss. Just then, Don slammed on his brakes. Traffic ahead was piling up, and the car in front of him had slowed down to an abrupt stop. Don felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, and he laid on his horn. He was about to roll down the window so he could scream at the driver in front of him, but then he saw Sienna open her eyes in alarm in the seat next to him, and he stopped himself. Don took a deep breath and reminded himself that it was just traffic and it wasn't worth getting angry about. Don used to have kind of a temper when it came to driving, But in recent years, he'd been working hard to control it so he could set a good example for his daughter. So after the traffic finally let up, and as he rounded an exit off the highway and drove through downtown Albuquerque toward his house, Don deliberately tried to shift his focus to something positive. It was already Wednesday, which meant it was only a few more days until Spaghetti Sunday. And that always made Don smile. Spaghetti Sunday was a tradition that he and Sienna had started together a few years ago by making big batches of food every Sunday after church and bringing the food downtown to feed the homeless.
At
first, it had just been the two of them, but over time, more people had joined in the effort, and pretty soon it had grown into a real event, with whole groups of volunteers coming out to serve food and drop off clothes and canned goods. Don felt proud that he'd created something so meaningful for the community, and it was especially important to him that he had done it with Sienna. Finally, Don turned down a quiet residential street and parked in the garage of a 2-story stucco townhouse decorated with Christmas lights. He got out of the car with Sienna, grabbed their suitcases, and walked to the front door and unlocked it. And when his daughter stepped inside, she shrieked with excitement, because waiting for her under the Christmas tree was a brand new bicycle wrapped in a shiny bow. She turned around and asked her dad if she could give the bike a spin around the block right now. Don wanted to say yes, but it was already dark out, and this was supposed to be a quick stop at his house, and when he looked at the clock, he saw that it was almost 7. He'd already had Sienna for most of December, including the whole holiday, and he had to get her back to her mother's house soon. Don and his ex-wife, Christine White, had a pretty civil relationship, but he knew she would be annoyed if he asked for more time. So Don told Sienna the bike would have to wait, but for now, just go grab whatever she needed from her room, and then they would leave. As Sienna ran off, Don noticed something strange. He hadn't seen his golden retriever, Buddy, who usually rushed out to greet him whenever he came home. So Don walked through the living room and down the hall, calling out Buddy's name, and finally found the dog cowering in the bedroom. Don extended his hand, and Buddy skittishly came forward to sniff it. And Don was a little unnerved by this. Buddy usually did not act scared of him, but then again, Don didn't usually leave for weeks at a time either, so he just told himself that, maybe this was just separation anxiety. So he gave Buddy a pat on the head, filled his bowl with kibble, and then grabbed his keys for the short drive to his ex-wife Christine's house. Don drove to Christine's very slowly, trying to enjoy every last bit of his time with Sienna. Don treasured the time he had with his daughter.
I'm trying not to pause too much. I don't trust that, right? The dog know who you are, and for some reason he's in the corner scared. That means somebody done been in your house, and that dog is trying to make sure that it's actually you that just came in there and not somebody else. Or you did something and the dog saw you do it, and the dog is like, let me just make sure that I don't piss him off so I don't be next. It's one of the two. I said W Don. I hope that don't come back to haunt me.
Because the mistakes he'd made when he was younger,
I said W for Spaghetti Sunday.
Away from him. These days, Don lived a squeaky clean life and went to church every Sunday, but it was not always that way. He had partied a lot when he was younger, and when Sienna was a toddler, he got fired from his dream job as a firefighter for failing a drug test. And after he'd lost his job, his then wife, Christine, had to shoulder most of the family's bills, and after a few months, the strain on the marriage was just too much. Christine filed for divorce, which was crushing for Don, but even worse was the possibility of losing Sienna. Don actually already had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and after that divorce, his first wife had gotten sole custody of those kids and moved them all to Oklahoma, so Don had barely seen them for most of their childhoods. He was determined not to make that same mistake with Sienna. So he'd gone to court to fight Christine and her new husband, Terry White, for shared custody. The court battle had gotten a little contentious, but it was worth it, and Don made the most of every moment he got to spend with Sienna. He'd braid her hair before school and make costumes for her school plays, and on the nights when she was at her mom's house, he always called her before bed to say goodnight. Now, Don pulled into Christine and Terry's driveway, and Christine came outside and stood by the front door with her arms crossed. She motioned to her watch, clearly annoyed that Don was late. Don got out of the car and sort of apologized and told her it had been a really long drive from California, and they'd only stopped a few times for gas and bathroom breaks, and they'd hit some traffic. That was why they were late. Christine sighed and said it was okay. She asked about the trip, and Don told her it went well. They had a great Christmas despite the, sadness over his sister's death, and it had been very meaningful just to be together. Before Sienna ran inside the house,
Excuse me.
Don pulled her in for a big hug and kiss, and then he promised to call her before bed as usual. And when he saw her again that weekend, they'd have plenty of time to test drive that new bike.
Oh no. Is he not
When
gonna
Don
call?
pulled back into his garage 10
Lord.
minutes later, he noticed that the trash can at the end of his driveway was lying overturned on its side. So he parked his truck, walked down to the curb, and flipped it upright. Then he walked back up the driveway, pressed a button to close the garage door, and unlocked the door to his townhouse. And while he was taking off his shoes and jacket, he could have sworn he heard the garage door stop closing and roll back up again, as if something had maybe tripped the sensor.
Uh-oh.
He stopped to listen, and now what he heard was the sound of the door actually closing again and actually hitting the ground with a soft thud. He shook his head and decided he must be imagining things. Don dragged his suitcase into the bedroom
Just
and
that
began
instinct.
to unpack. All he wanted to do was just relax and not really think about anything. But when he carried his toiletries into his bathroom to put them away, he saw a small hole in the ceiling and let out a frustrated sigh. Don had been hounding his landlord about patching that hole for months, and he'd been hoping it would have been done by the time he got home. So he made a mental note to give the landlord yet another call about it in the morning. When he was finally finished unpacking, Don put his jacket and his shoes back on and then headed out to the garage to smoke a cigarette.
Uh-oh.
The following morning, December 29th, at the
Didn't
office
show
where
up for
Don
work.
worked,
Oh man.
his coworker, Valerie Torres, was settling down at her desk when her phone rang. Valerie picked it up and heard Don's daughter, Sienna, on the other line. Sienna told Valerie that her dad did not call her last night and asked if he was there now at the office. So Valerie stood up and peered over at Don's desk, but it was empty. This was a little unusual, since Don was a pretty punctual guy,
Oh no.
but it was still early,
Somebody done
so she
got
told
him.
Sienna not to worry. She would give Don a call now, and she was sure he would call Sienna right back. Valerie hung up and dialed Don's cell phone, but he didn't answer. So she sent him a text message, and she waited. But after half an hour, Don still hadn't replied. And
Oh,
now
no.
Valerie was starting to feel concerned. It was not like Don to skip work without calling in, and then ignore calls and texts too. And so Valerie discussed it with another coworker, and they decided to just go swing by Don's townhouse themselves and check on him. The sky over Don's townhouse was dark and cloudy when Valerie pulled into the driveway. She and her coworker got out of the car and walked up to the front door. Valerie knocked on the door, but to her surprise, it actually just swung right open.
Oh no.
She looked over at her coworker, then the two of them
I ain't
nervously
going
stepped
in.
inside. Valerie immediately called out Don's name, but he didn't answer, so she wandered into the living room and
Oh,
peeked
look
into
at the
bedroom.
bike. No.
The house seemed empty.
Oh, he had a cat too.
Valerie's coworker, meanwhile, headed up the stairs to look for Don on the second floor. And Valerie headed out to the garage to see if maybe Don's truck was there. And when Valerie opened the door to the two-car garage attached to the townhouse and flipped on the light, she saw Don's truck was in its usual spot. But something else caught her eye. On the back wall of the garage, behind the neighbor's SUV, she noticed a streak of something dark red on the wall.
Uh-oh.
At this point, Valerie started to feel pretty nervous. But nonetheless, she began walking towards that back wall to see what was going on over there. And as she got closer and closer, she was staring at the streak, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her, until finally she was close enough that she could actually look down at the space between the SUV and the red streaked wall. And when she looked down, she screamed.
Oh, she found his body. Oh my goodness. Well, who killed him? Why would they kill him though?
A little before noon on that same day,
I guess you got to figure that out. But I'm like, why would he die? Like he somebody killed him for spaghetti Sunday? Like, what if it's like a jealousy type
Albuquerque
thing?
police detective Matthew Kaplan pulled up in front of a
This is kinda
two-story stucco
interesting, though.
townhouse secured with yellow crime scene tape and swarming with police officers. Two women wearing business clothes were sitting on the curb, and both of their faces were stained with tears and smeared makeup. All Detective Kaplan knew was that a man had been found dead in a garage attached to this townhouse, and now he, Detective Kaplan, was heading up the investigation. So he got out of his car and walked up to the open front door, and a policeman standing in the entryway filled him in on a few more details. The victim had been identified as Don Fluid.
Oh man,
The two women outside were his
darn,
coworkers who had come
no.
here to check on him when he hadn't shown up for work that morning. There were no signs of forced entry, and the women said the front door was open when they arrived. Kaplan stepped inside the townhouse into the living room, and right away he saw a brand new bicycle sitting under a Christmas tree. Then he did a slow loop through the first and second floors and noted there was a cell phone on the couch and a wallet on the kitchen counter. It didn't really look like anything had been rifled through. The drawers in the house were not hanging open, and the house generally was neat and orderly. And so on first glance,
But I mean, they didn't even. You wasn't even trying to rob the man or nothing. You just killed them. Like for whatever reason, you just killed them because the house looks normal. Like it don't look like nothing been like tossed around or nothing. So you ain't even looking for no money, and then you just off this man for what reason? This is crazy.
this did not appear to Kaplan like a
People
robbery.
just kill you for no reason.
Back on the first floor,
Insane.
Kaplan headed into the garage, where crime scene techs were busy photographing the scene and collecting forensic samples. Kaplan
think I
knelt
could be a
down next to
crime scene
Don's
tech, I'm
body,
not gonna lie.
which was laying face up between an SUV and the back wall. Don's throat was cut with a gaping wound that ran
Oh,
from one side of his
wow.
neck to the other. And there
Dang.
were smaller cuts and scrapes near his eye, his ear, and on his hand, as if he had tried to fight back.
Yeah.
There were also signs of blunt force trauma, as if he had been hit by an object like a baseball bat or maybe just a fist.
Ooh.
And when Kaplan looked closely,
Oh, okay. So they probably came up behind him. Once he went in to smoke the cigarette, probably hid in the corner or something. He came out and they probably just, bam, hit him in the head with a bat or something. And they, they turn around, they start scrapping, but he probably was all thrown off from getting smacked in the head by something, especially if he got blunt force trauma. So I mean, he probably was rattled and he trying to fight back, and somebody hit you like that, somebody hit you that hard, you trying to scrap and tussle with him, and you already thrown off because they done whacked you upside the head. Now you got to kind of try to catch yourself. You got to try to, you like, whoa, like you dizzy and stuff. But you still trying to rumble because you basically at that point you fighting for your life. Like you got to do something. You can't just sit there and just let it happen. You gotta scrap. So but he probably was already thrown off. Somebody get the right hit on you after that. They done already caught you off guard, whacked you upside the head. So they get one good hit on you and they gonna drop you. And that's probably exactly what happened. He probably tried to, do his best, but that one good hit put him on the ground, and then from there they just slice his throat. That's insane, bro. I really want to know who did this because this is crazy.
he
But
saw
so far it seems like he died for nothing. Like I don't understand why him. I guess we gonna figure it out, of course. But I'm just throwing off.
burst capillaries on Don's eyes and eyelids,
So they choked
which he
him.
knew were commonly a sign of strangulation.
Yeah.
This
so-
killing
so
was
they choked the
unusually
life out of him.
violent and gruesome.
It
which
got to be
Kaplan
somebody that
knew
know him.
meant this was likely personal. Kaplan stood up to examine the blood that was spattered on the walls and refrigerator above Don's body, and the bloody handprints on the side of Don's truck. There was no blood on the floor around Don. However, it sort of appeared like somebody had recently mopped and maybe tried to clean up the blood afterwards. That's when Kaplan noticed an empty bottle of bleach on top of the washer nearby. So he walked over, he opened up the washer, and sure enough, he found piles of wet towels inside that actually still smelled like bleach. Just then, a crime scene tech came over carrying luminol spray, which
So
is a
you-
chemical used by
so
law
you-
enforcement to detect blood.
This gotta be personal. I'm wondering now if it's possibly the ex-husband. This has to be personal, bro. Because at this point, not only did you kill him, but then you tried to clean them up. So this don't seem like no serial killer type ish. Because they would have just killed you and left you there. This gotta be like, this is like, what do they call it? Crime of passion or something like that? I think it's called crime of passion. This has to be something like that because at this point, you sliced his throat, you strangled him, which means that you had some type of anger or frustration built up towards him. And then you kill him, but then you try to clean up the scene, which means I wonder if that person must have got injured and they're trying to that that could be a possibility. Maybe that person got injured and they're like, "Oh crap, I got to clean it up because this fool done cut me." Not no disrespect to the dead, but in that person's perspective, they like, "Dang, this dude done cut me. Now I got to clean up this blood because my blood it might be mixed in with his, and well, once they find them, then they going to come and try to then they're gonna be able to match my blood or maybe separate the two DNA profiles and figure out, okay, I'm a woman, if it's a woman for say, for instance, I should say, and then you can say, okay, now this is a woman, so we know that obviously Don is a grown man, so whoever did this is a woman. So now we just look at the women in his life that possibly had a grudge with him, like his ex-wife or whatever. Or, if it's a man and the blood profile is similar, hell, it might be his brother or something. So I guess in that instance, maybe the person got injured and maybe that's why they, kind of clean up the blood. But other than that, this has to be personal.
So Kaplan
Like
stepped back
there's
so
no
he
other
could spray
excuse.
the
It has to be
area,
personal.
and then Kaplan followed him around as he made his way through the house. The luminol spray did pick up traces of blood on the kitchen floor and the sink too.
So that means
Kaplan
somebody washed their
figured the
hands.
suspect had tried to clean up the crime scene in the garage and then wash their hands or the murder weapon in the kitchen before leaving.
Probably tried
But
to wash
it is
the
much
bleach,
harder
get
to
the bleach
scrub a
smell
murder
out
scene
their
than
hand.
people realize. And so as Kaplan left the house, he was feeling fairly hopeful that the crime scene techs would eventually recover some of the killer's DNA. Kaplan stepped through the front door
Hope so.
just as a car pulled up and parked at the end of the driveway. A man got out of the car and pushed past the crime scene tape, and immediately Kaplan put his hands up to stop him. This man looked totally flustered, and he introduced himself as Benny Ruiz, the landlord, and asked what the police were doing on his property.
Oh.
When Kaplan told Benny that his tenant, Don Fluitt, had been murdered, Benny gasped, then started talking a mile a minute. He said Don was a devoted father and a religious man who would open up his home to anyone and that nobody would want to kill him. But then Benny paused and made a face like something was just occurring to him. And he said that actually, there was one lead he could think of. He told Kaplan that Don did charity work with the homeless, and he said it was possible that somebody from the street could have maybe broken into Don's house and killed him. After Kaplan finished talking
Sounds
to
like an
Benny, he
excuse.
sent
He
him on
did
his
it.
way,
I'm just
and then he just stood on Don's driveway, thinking about what Benny had said. Based on the extreme violence of the murder and the fact that nothing appeared to be stolen, he doubted very much that this had just been a break-in by
Definitely
a
not
random homeless person.
Yeah, no.
He thought it was much more likely that Don's killer was someone Don knew.
Somebody that knew him.
Maybe even someone who had a key, based on the fact that there was no evidence of forced entry.
Nah, they got
And
into the
since
garage,
Don
so-
was a big and muscular guy, and it was clear he had fought back with his attacker, Kaplan figured he was probably looking for a strong, potentially big male suspect. The question was, who would want to kill Don Fluitt? From what the landlord and the two coworkers who had called 911 had said, Don seemed to be a really stand-up guy. If he had any dark secrets, they were very well hidden. The next day, December 30th, Detective Kaplan went to the house of Don's ex-wife, Christine White, and her husband, Terry White. Kaplan had spoken to Christine the day before just to break the news about her ex-husband's death, and also to see what she might know about the murder. Christine hadn't had any ideas about who would have wanted to hurt Don, but she'd mentioned that he used to have a problem with road rage, and he had just finished a 12-hour drive, so, maybe he had gotten into it with another
about that
driver, and
already.
maybe they had followed him home. But she also said their daughter had been with him, and she didn't mention anything about that. The only other thing Christine could think
Forgot
of
about that.
was that Don had actually told her that his dog was acting skittish when he had gotten back from that road trip. Kaplan had quickly ruled out Christine as a suspect because she had an airtight alibi. Don had dropped Sienna off at Christine's around 7:45 the night he was killed, and then she and Sienna had spent the rest of the night together. Her road rage idea seemed as unlikely as the landlord's theory that a random homeless person had broken in. And the information about the dog was interesting, but not particularly helpful in identifying
I don't think the road rage thing is too crazy because people get pissed. Like people be out here like especially if you like me and you in Houston, people go to the extreme when it comes to road rage. Like people be getting shot and killed out here because somebody blew their horn at them and stuff. Like people get really, really, really ignorant and evil when it comes to road rage. So I wouldn't completely rule out road rage. I did forget about that until he brought it up, but I forgot all about the road rage thing. I'm over here thinking there's got to be somebody close to him, but I forgot about that. But it's a possibility because I've seen the anger that people portray when they get upset. So I'm just saying I know. I think personally it's somebody that's closer to him, but I definitely would not just throw out road rage because it's a possibility.
Suspect. But now Kaplan was back at Christine's house because he still needed to speak to her husband, Terry, who had been out of town last night for work since he was a truck driver and often worked long
He wasn't
shifts
out of
at odd
town.
hours. But as the husband of Don's ex-wife, he was a natural suspect.
Of
When
course.
Kaplan rang the doorbell, Terry opened the door and greeted the detective with a polite smile. Kaplan entered the living room where Christine and Sienna were sitting and said hello,
I wonder if it's
and then asked
detective,
them
the
to
first
leave
thing you
so he
look
could
for
speak to
is
Terry in
injuries. Right?
private.
So
Terry sat.
I know there's possibly no chance that an actual detective would see this video, but in this case, you say you're looking for possibly a strong male because you're looking at the physique of Don, and you're like, okay, this had to be a big dude to basically like grapple with him, get him down, and do whatever to him. So you got to be. So I'm like, the first thing you look for this dude. You go to the ex-wife's house. The new husband opens the door. I'm like, the first thing you got to be looking for is like cuts and bruises and scrapes and stuff like that, right? Like it has to be.
Down in an armchair across from Kaplan. He seemed calm and friendly as he told the detective that he and Don didn't have much contact with each other. But their relationship was not exactly bad. It was just awkward because of the custody battle Don had had with Christine. Ever since then, Terry said, he'd tried to keep the peace by just sort of avoiding Don. He knew Sienna loved her dad like crazy, and if he accidentally sparked a conflict, Sienna would likely take Don's side. As for the night of Don's murder, Terry told Kaplan he was at his sister's house until about 9 p.m., and then he left and he stopped at Wendy's on the way to work, and then he took a nap in his truck in the parking lot before going in for his shift. After Kaplan left and went back to the station, he immediately called Terry's sister and also Terry's boss, and they both confirmed Terry's whereabouts, which meant that Terry's alibi was solid, and Kaplan was back to square one on suspects. But while he was writing up a report on Terry's interview, his phone rang with a call from one of Don's neighbors. She told him she had been looking over the footage from her security camera for the night of Don's murder, and she found something that she thought the detective might want to see. Kaplan stopped writing his report mid-sentence and drove right to this neighbor's house, where she led him inside, to her computer, where she pressed play. Kaplan leaned in close to the screen and watched the black and white footage of the side of Don's townhouse shot from the top of the driveway next door. At 7:41 p.m., a few minutes after Kaplan knew that Don and Sienna had left for Christine's house, a hooded figure could be seen in the corner of the frame. The figure tipped over Don's trash can and then walked up the driveway toward Don's garage and disappeared from the screen. About 15 minutes later, the video showed Don driving into the garage and then walking out again to go pick up the trash can and then walking back up the driveway. Now, the garage door itself was not in frame, but the camera...
Oh, damn. That person is no good, but that's smart. They pushed the garbage can over on purpose, which I just realized. Then they hid, probably on the side of the house, pushed it so that he could go back and get the garbage can. He comes back up, and then they sneak in the garage after him. Damn. Well, people ain't no good.
Did capture a faint glow of light coming from inside Don's garage. Kaplan could see that light dimming, which meant the garage door was closing. But then inexplicably, the door must have begun going back up again because the light began to get bigger. And at the same time, there were several brief flashes of light. And then after the flashes, the light began to dim again, which meant the garage door closed, eventually leaving the driveway in darkness. Kaplan got a copy of this video, then left the neighbor's house and walked over to Don's, trying to piece together what actually happened on the video. He stood inside of Don's garage and held the garage door clicker in his hand, and he pressed the button to close the door. And as it closed, Kaplan walked closer until he was almost directly underneath the door's path. And then, when that happened, all of a sudden, the door stopped because Kaplan had actually tripped the sensor by going right underneath it. And as soon as he tripped the sensor, a light on the top of the garage flashed 3 times as the door not only stopped, but began going back the other way. It was clearly how the system worked if it was tripped.
Okay.
And so once he saw that, Kaplan thought about those strange flashes of light he saw in the video, and then also that hooded figure he had seen lurking near the garage. And all at once, it was like the pieces clicked into place. the suspect must have followed Don into the garage.
Mm-hmm.
But when they went into the garage, perhaps they tripped the sensor. And so as that door was coming down, the suspect's trying to sneak in. They trip the sensor, the door stops, there's those flashes of light, the door begins to go up again. But the suspect, not wanting Don to realize what's going on, rushed over, hits the button, the door shuts, Don is none the wiser. Unfortunately, as valuable as this footage appeared to be, Kaplan was not able to make out the dark figure's face on this security video. But, the video had given him a few extremely valuable clues. Whoever killed Dawn must have known his routine. They also must have known when he would leave to take Sienna to her mother's house, and when he would likely come back home. And they also must have known that Don was the type of person who, when he pulled into his driveway and saw that overturned trash can, that he wouldn't just let it sit there. He would deal with it that night. He would go down there and he would turn it upright. And when Don was doing that, that would give the killer an opportunity to sneak into the garage. And all of this meant that the suspect didn't just know Don. They had to have known him very well.
Yep.
Detective Kaplan spent weeks speaking to everyone who knew Don, from coworkers to friends to his entire family.
Somebody
including
gonna
his
have
first wife and
somebody
the
finna have a hole in that alibi.
Tiffany and Josh, who had gone to live in Oklahoma with their mom after the divorce. When Kaplan reached the kids, who were now young adults, they said they had mostly stayed on good terms with their dad. However, they said that wasn't true of some of the other members of their family. They told Kaplan the person he should be investigating was Don's own brother, Dennis. They said that Don and Dennis had had a falling out about a year earlier, but somehow, after Don's death, Dennis had gotten the keys to Don's townhouse, and he'd been out there boxing things up and basically taking control over everything ever since. Now, Dennis was apparently telling the family that he was just trying to help, but Tiffany and Josh, they weren't sure they believed that.
He trying to hide some evidence. He been up to something.
Towards the end of January 2017, so nearly a month after Don was murdered, Kaplan brought Don's brother, Dennis, into the Albuquerque police station for questioning. And seated across the interrogation table, Dennis seemed a little keyed up, but Kaplan couldn't tell whether he was nervous about the interview because he was guilty or irritated about it because he was innocent. Dennis said that the feud between him and his brother had started after their father had passed away in October of 2015, a little over a year earlier. The family had reached an agreement over what to do with their dad's possessions, but Don had violated that agreement by actually keeping one of their father's cars instead of selling it. The argument had spiraled from there, and pretty soon, Dennis said that he and Don were no longer on speaking terms. Dennis said he had reached out that fall and tried to reconnect, but he said Don never returned his calls. Dennis said he had hoped that they could at some point patch things up, if they just tried a little bit harder. But then Dennis said he had gotten the call that Don was dead. Kaplan narrowed his eyes as Dennis finished the explanation. He didn't really buy the reconciliation story, and Dennis's only alibi was that he was home alone when his brother was killed. So Kaplan decided to push. He asked Dennis why he'd started rooting through Don's house the minute the crime scene was cleared. And at this, Dennis began to get pretty defensive. He insisted he only wanted to spare the rest of his family the pain of having to do that themselves. Besides, he said, his hard work settling Don's affairs had actually led him to a lead about the murder that he wanted Kaplan to look into. And that was that just a few days after the murder, he'd walked into Don's house and found the landlord, Benny Ruiz, standing inside with no good explanation for what he was doing there. Dennis said he had heard from Don's neighbors that Don and this landlord had been going back and forth over some hole that the landlord was supposed to repair but hadn't yet. And Dennis just thought it was extremely odd that Benny would just walk into a crime scene, even if he did technically own the place. Kaplan sat back in his chair, remembering Benny Ruiz coming to the house on the day Don's body was found. Benny had been very quick to suggest, without any evidence, that maybe a homeless person could have broken in and murdered Don. Maybe, Kaplan thought now, Benny had just been trying to deflect suspicion away from himself. The next day, Kaplan brought Benny Ruiz into the station for an interview.
Oh, man.
Like Don's brother Dennis, Benny did not have a solid alibi for the night Don was killed. But he could explain why Dennis had found him inside of Don's house on that day. He said he was only there to feed the dog because nobody was looking after it during the first few days following Don's death. Benny then leaned across the table and told Kaplan that if there were one person he should be looking into, it was Dennis. Benny said that from the moment Dennis arrived, he'd been acting really weird. Benny said he owned another townhouse a few blocks away from Don's, and Dennis had apparently asked if he could rent it so he could move some of Don's stuff into it and set it up as a new home for Sienna. Benny had found this strange, and when he ran a background check on Dennis, he discovered he had a criminal record for assault and disorderly conduct, so he had told him no. Now, Kaplan already knew about the criminal record because he had run Dennis's name before bringing him in for questioning. But now, listening to this account from the landlord, he wondered why, after a year of estrangement, Dennis was suddenly so interested in his brother's life. But as the weeks passed, Kaplan just couldn't make a case against Dennis. In fact, he couldn't make a case against anybody. Neither Dennis nor Benny had alibis that could prove they weren't the killer, but there was also nothing that proved
that they
were. The portrait
gotta
of
find
Don
that murder
as a
weapon.
loving father and a man of faith who had reformed himself after some mistakes in his youth appeared to be completely accurate. Don's most recent ex-wife, Christine, had fought with Don, over custody, but that battle seemed to have cooled off, and both she and her new husband, Terry, had alibis. Don also didn't appear to have any girlfriends he could have been fighting with. And so there just didn't seem to be anybody who truly wanted Don dead. In February, so about 6 weeks after the murder, the local newspaper ran a front-page article saying the police had no suspects and no evidence. And when Kaplan read it, he had to admit that it was more or less the truth. The breakthrough that Kaplan desperately needed wouldn't come until March of 2017, so 12 weeks into the investigation. On that day, he got a call from the forensics lab, and they told him a key piece of evidence had just come in. And the person who had made this critical piece of evidence possible
Was it the dog?
was Don Fluitt himself.
Oh, wait, Don. Wait, what happened? What did he do? Oh, wait. Did he
Based on forensic
he
evidence, interviews,
scratched the
and
person?
the police investigation, here's what police believe happened to Don Fluitt on the night of December 28th, 2016.
Did he scratch the person? He got DNA under his fingernails or something?
The killer waited in the darkness right outside of Don's house until the garage door opened at about 7:40 p.m. At that point, Don drove off with his daughter in the truck, and so the killer immediately darted forward and tipped over a garbage can, and then retreated back to the shadows to wait. The killer had been nursing a grudge against Don for a long time. It annoyed them that everyone thought Don was so great, because the killer knew that until just a few years earlier, Don had been this drug-abusing loser with 2 kids he didn't even care for,
Is it
and
his
another
brother?
one who he deserved to lose in
no.
Sienna. But for some reason, nobody else saw
wait, was
Don for
the
what he truly
ex-husband?
was.
I mean, was the other
So the
husband?
killer had bided their time for as long as they could stand it, but finally, they had had enough. Don was just a dark cloud hovering over their life constantly, and he had to go. The killer knew Don well enough to figure out his schedule. They knew he was due to drop his daughter off at her mother's that evening, and that he'd be coming home alone after that, and that before he went to bed, he would go into the garage to smoke a cigarette. The killer clutched a tire thumper in their hand, which is a small wooden bat used to check tire pressure. And as they clutched it, they felt their heart race with anticipation. Finally, just before 8 p.m., Don came back, and while he was out fixing the trash can, the killer snuck into the garage. They hid behind a vehicle as Don walked back up the driveway and pressed a button to close the garage door and then open the door to his own townhouse. At that point, the killer snuck out from behind the vehicle to get into position, and as they did this, they accidentally tripped the garage door sensor, sending the door rolling back up and sending those lights flashing. And so thinking fast, the killer rushed over to the panel on the wall and pressed the button again to close the garage door. Then they held their breath, listening for any movement inside the townhouse that would suggest Don was like, "What's going on?" and coming out.
Was it the streak on the wall? Oh my goodness, was it the streak on the wall? Did he leave a streak on the wall and then they checked the panel and they got a fingerprint off the panel? Oh my goodness.
To check, but Don didn't seem to notice.
Oh
So
my
the killer
goodness.
breathed out a sigh of relief.
Is that what he did?
And took their position near the door. And then after a while, The doorknob jiggled, and the killer realized this was it. They raised their weapon, and as soon as Don opened the door, they struck him so hard the tire thumper broke into pieces.
Damn.
Then they punched on again and again with their bare fists, finally letting out all the rage they'd been pushing down for so long. Don did everything he could to fight back. I mean, he had turned his life around. He had a daughter that he loved, that he was trying to build an amazing life with. He was not just going to give up here. And so, as valiantly as he could, he fought the killer. But he had been gravely injured, and when he couldn't fight anymore, he just tried to crawl under his truck and hide. But the killer pulled him out and landed one last punch to his face. Don stopped moving, and at that point, the killer wrapped their hands around his throat and they squeezed. But the killer wasn't done. To make sure Don was dead, they also went into Don's apartment, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, came back into the garage, knelt down, and ruthlessly slit Don's throat.
Damn.
Blood ran out of the wound and poured onto the concrete. The killer found some bleach inside and tried to clean up the mess as best as they could, but they left behind one crucial piece of evidence. Don was not able to save his own life, but by aggressively fighting back, he'd given investigators a clue that would solve his murder, and also ensure that in his absence, his daughter Sienna would grow up in a safe and secure home. Because the key piece of forensic evidence that was left behind that solved the case was DNA found under Don's fingernails. It belonged to none other than Sienna's own stepfather, Terry White. It would turn out that Terry's story to the cops about being at his sister's until 9 p.m. was a lie. And so, on April 3rd, 2017, just over 3 months after Don's murder, Terry White was arrested and charged with murder. After his arrest, Terry cast blame on his wife, Christine, saying she was the one who put him up to it so they could have Sienna to themselves. And so Christine was also arrested and charged with murder, but the charges against her were dropped due to a lack of evidence.
Okay.
Terry, however, was convicted in August of 2018 of first-degree murder, aggravated burglary, and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 12 years.
Wow. What grudge did he have against this man to kill him like that?
Thank you so much for watching.
Like, so you killed him, you killed him that violently because people thought he was a good dude? Like, are you serious? Wow, like, bro, just because people thought this man was a good guy, and you like, oh, he's such a druggie. He ain't got, why everybody think he's such a spectacular guy? He ain't nothing but a drug addict and all this, and you do all that? That's insane. You first of all, you hit him so hard with the tire thumper that it broke. Dang, you broke it. You beat him down. Then you strangle him to make sure he's dead. And then you say, okay, I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to triple down to make sure you're dead. And you slice his throat. That is wild. That's an unimaginable amount of rage that you have built up in you about this guy. At that point, I'm thinking it got to be the brother, because that's like a lifetime of rage. Like, that's somebody that feels like, man, like I knew this person all his life, and he's just this, I'm tired of people thinking that my brother is so great and he's nothing. Like, that's the kind of stuff that is. You didn't even know that man like that. You didn't even know him that long. You just a ex-wife's new man, and you got that much anger. That means your anger is a danger to people, because nobody should piss you off that bad that quick. That's a lifetime of anger that you gathered in a few years. That's crazy, man. Rest in peace to Don, though. Rest in peace to him. It's heartbreaking that he fought as hard as he could, but man, that tire thumper, I'm pretty sure is what pretty much did it. That tire thumper, I'm pretty sure he hit him so hard it broke. That pretty much sealed the deal. I mean, you can fight as hard as you can, but at that point, unless you get like a really good knockout or a hit on the chin that just knocks him down, where you can get out of the garage and just yell for help, at that point Like you at that point, you're done for. Dang, rest in peace to him though. I hope his daughter and the rest of his kids, I hope they all grow up to, remember, him for the good times and stuff like that. And I hope they all see the way that he changed his life for the better and how he tried to do so much better for his daughter and set a better example for Sienna and the other kids as well. And I hope they remember the good times of his life. And Terry's right where he needs to be, because that's an unnecessary amount of rage. And at that point, if you have that much anger towards somebody, please seek professional help. Go see a therapist or something, bro. Don't don't throw your life away out of rage over something that could be let go. Let go, let go, and let live. Because that man lost his life over nothing. But with all that being said, thank y'all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was an absolutely crazy story. But I love y'all. God bless. And I will see y'all in the next one. But until then, peace.